Welcome everyone. I'm very happy to see all of you here today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to voice them after the performance part. To start with, Vasyl Alexandrovich Barvinsky was a Ukrainian composer at the beginning of the 20th century. He lived from February 8 of 1888 to June 9th of 1963. Barvinsky was also a pianist, conductor, teacher, musicologist, music critic, doctor honoris causa of Prague University, music-related social figure in Western Ukraine, and one of the major representatives of Ukrainian musical culture of the 20th century. As an undergraduate, I played Barvinsky's first piano prelude for a jury, and I became curious about him and his 4 other piano preludes, which I was told about but never heard. I had neither the music nor any literary resources. Gradually, through several years of research, all the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. The long journey has led me to this point here today, and this lecture recital is my tribute to Vasyl Barvinsky. He and his preludes have been the focus of my master's research, major paper, and piano performance experience. Before you hear this beautiful music today, I would like to share with you a little bit about Vasyl Barvinsky, his 5 piano preludes, and the Ukrainian folkloric elements and imitations in them. And then I will wrap up my lecture before the performance. Born in the Ukrainian city of Ternopil, Vasyl Barvinsky descended from an established aristocratic family. He gained professional musical education in Lviv Conservatory of Music and continued his studies in Prague. He studied with the leading teachers of the time, such as Josef Suk, Vyacheslav Novak, and William Kurz. In 1915, Barvinsky returned to Lviv and became the professor and head of Lysenkov Music Institution. From 1944 until 1947, he was director of the Lviv Conservatory, which is equivalent of Western postgraduate institutions with master's and PhD programs. Barvinsky became central to musical life in Lviv and Western Ukraine. He presented and organized musicological lectures, published musical reviews and articles, and toured as a composer and performer throughout Ukraine and Europe. Barvinsky was one of the first Ukrainian composers to gain worldwide recognition. His compositions were published not only in the former Soviet Union, but also in Vienna, Leipzig, New York by Universal Edition, and even in Japan. Published in New York in 1943 during World War II, a piano collection of the Soviet Union's 10 most outstanding composers, such as Prokofiev and Khachaturian, included a piece by Vasyl Barvinsky. Streets and institutions were named after him in Ukraine. Barvinsky's works include approximately 30 opuses. He wrote in almost all genres except ballet. His style can be defined as late romantic with impressionistic features and strong influence of Ukrainian folklore. His compositions are distinct in their dual inspiration, European high standards and national folklore of Ukraine. As a result, Barvinsky elevated Ukrainian national music to a classical world standard, while preserving its unique cultural essence. Barvinsky's chamber compositions were among the first professional instances of this style in Ukraine. His preludes, which you are going to hear today, were the first piano preludes in Ukraine. Along with these, Barvinsky contributed many outstanding and multifaceted achievements. There is little doubt that Barvinsky was a master in his style. Yet, the work of this Ukrainian master is little known, and his work is scarcely explored in Western musicology. This is due in part to repression by the former Soviet Union's totalitarian regime and to Barvinsky's 10-year exile from 1948 to 58 in Mordovia jails. Although conditions in Gulag camps were extremely difficult, Barvinsky persisted in musical and pedagogical activity to the best of his abilities while in the camps. When arrested, Barvinsky was forced to sign a paper stating, "I allow the destruction of my manuscripts." Little did he know that NKVD, or the People's Commissariat for International Affairs, was indeed planning to do this. When Barvinsky returned to Ukraine in 1958, after exile, in weak health and elderly, he discovered that all copies of his compositions had been burned in the front yard of the Lviv Conservatory of Music, which Barvinsky directed for several years. Until the end of his days, he was not able to locate any copies. He died in 1963 in Lviv. In 1964, the Soviet government posthumously rehabilitated or rehabilitoval Barvinsky, meaning that he was no longer blacklisted. During and after the Soviet regime, Ukrainian musicology greatly lacked academic research dedicated to Barvinsky. His name was silenced, artistic works were removed from educational pedagogical curricula, and his compositions remained mostly unpublished. After more than 40 years of being banished from Ukraine within the Soviet Union, it is only relatively recently that Barvinsky and his legacy were given rebirth by Ukrainian musicology and by the Barvinsky Project in the West. My research, today's presentation, my paper, and the performance join and contribute to the academic endeavor of contemporary musicologists to rediscover and restore Barvinsky's compositional heritage and cultural significance. Barvinsky's Piano Preludes Opus 8 is a piano cycle consisting of 5 preludes. It was written in 1908 when Barvinsky was only 20 years old. To this day, they testify to his great talent. Although they became popular during Barvinsky's pre-exile period, Piano Preludes Opus 8 is rare, either in printed form or in piano performing practices. Barvinsky not only intertwines Ukrainian folk tunes in his music, but his compositions often reflect folk instruments through imitation. Ukrainian dances and songs are echoed or incorporated within his Piano Preludes cycle. The first prelude is reminiscent of Ukrainian folk song. It is written in G major and in variation form with theme and 5 variations. Please listen to the theme. The theme introduces a 4-note motif, B, A, B, E. This motif recurs and develops through modulations, texture expansion, and harmonic complications throughout the prelude. The vocal quality of this melody and its distinct character have led a number of musicologists to associate it with Ukrainian vocal folklore. The variation-based method of musical development originates from народно-пісенна традиція, or the tradition of folk singing. Barvinsky employs one more compositional device to add the feel of Ukrainian music, the use of Ukrainian church bell imitation, which could be traced in the 3rd variation, particularly through the F-sharp solid octaves in the left hand or in the bass. Please listen. In most Ukrainian cities, large bells adorn myriad Catholic and Orthodox churches. The church bells and their overtones are intrinsic to the Ukrainian environment. The second prelude, Allegretto Pastorale, was written by Barvinsky in only 4 hours, and it is in his favorite key, F-sharp major. Stylistically, this prelude is marked with the influence of Impressionism. Contributing to this are the use of high register, tender diatonic melodic lines, and playfulness and liveliness alternating with prolonged stops. In his poetic impressions, Ivan Fedorenko associated this prelude's music with a spring evening in Ukrainian nature, and its melody with water drops in a large fountain. I would like to suggest an imitation in this prelude of not only Ukrainian nature, but also of one of its most distinct instruments, the sopilka. The sopilka is a Ukrainian woodwind instrument. It is a small vertical flute with 10 holes and with C tuning. Here is a sopilka player or sopilkar, and different types of sopilka. This is my collection, and this one is the second one from the left. So here is C major. You could play either vibrator on this or trill, or you can blow Ukrainian constant R through it. Here is a typical tune played on sopilka. The sopilka-like melody in this prelude is heard in the beginning of it. This is how it could be performed on sopilka. This figure is in the sopilka's range, with ornamentation and long-short note juxtaposition resembling the sopilka sound within a traditional Ukrainian ensemble or orchestra. This sopilka melodic figure is distributed all over the prelude, with contrasting middle choral part followed by the final recurrence of the sopilka melody. This time, its register is notably higher, and as the sopilka often echoes bird sounds, here it seems as if a bird started echoing sopilka. Here is a melody reminiscent of woodland birds. The second prelude was described by German professor, critic, and musicologist Theodor Werner as, quote, a pearl in the music literature of the world, end of quote. This prelude became one of the most distinct and loved Ukrainian musical examples of pastoral incorporated in a piano miniature. The third prelude is a dance and a stylized kolomyka. Kolomyka is a traditional genre of Ukrainian folk music that originates in dance songs of Carpathian regions. Traditionally, it is a fast circular dance, and it is accompanied by improvised singing, shouts, and foot stomping, so-called tropity. Hutsuls and boykos divide this genre in two types: to dance, usually performed by men with fast duple meter, and to sing, performed by women with slower, less metrically defined rhythms. The following video is of Ukrainian national dance ensemble Virsky. As in Barvinsky's third prelude, you can see slow introduction and fast main section in dance and music. Also pay attention to the orchestra, it contains Ukrainian traditional instruments. And you will see fast footsteps or tropity. They are also called притупування. Geographically, Kolomyka emerged from the city of Kolomych in the Ivano-Frankivsk region, and it became one of the genres most favored by West Ukrainian composers in the 20th century. Fast and musically exciting, this prelude echoes Kolomyka's authentic performance manner through use of duple meter, resilient dance rhythms with marked syncopations, and frequent tempo changes originating from two-dance Kolomyka type. Flexible and highly expressive melodic lines, often of singing quality, originating from the to-sing Kolomyka type. Barvinsky's special sensitivity to the sound coloring of Kolomyka instrumental accompaniment is distinct in the imitation of one of the most typical Kolomyka folk instruments, cymbali, a Ukrainian type of hammer dulcimer. Fast 16th notes in parallel motion, alternating with long sustained chords, are often heard in the cymbal repertoire. The accompanying chord figures of fast melody could be viewed as an imitation of the traditional Kolomyka ensemble instrument double bass. The fast melodic material emulates the sound of traditional violin and sopilka instruments, which indeed produce fast, rhythmically driven melodies or constant trills. Thus, Barvinsky at least marginally recreates the image of Kolomyka's traditional performance manner and instrumental ensemble. The next prelude, 4, was called by Barvinsky choral, and indeed its texture resembles a chorale written for piano. Please listen to its introduction. This Andante Religioso section could be easily sung by a Ukrainian folk or church choir. Several features are typical of traditional Ukrainian народне хорове багатоголосся or folk choir multi-voice singing. was a Ukrainian national choir named after Virovka. So, this prelude also echoes the first prelude in its melody. For instance, compare the initial melodic motif of the first prelude and the middle part of the fourth prelude. In structure or architecture, both preludes contain a calm introduction, textural expansion, a more dramatic section with textural and dynamic increase, a strong climax, and a calm concluding section which echoes their introductions. Thus, Barvinsky creates an arc within his cycle, which allows me to view it as a multi-movement large work. I have heard interpretations of this prelude which sound like funeral music, very dark. To me, it is the opposite. This music reminds me of spring, of life sprouting, leaves and flowers blooming, everything you can see outside right now. And today I will play it for you for the first time in this interpretation. The final Prelude 5 was classified by Barvinsky as heroic. This prelude is different from the other four preludes in that it is late romantic in its style. Indeed, heroic in its character, melodically expressive, uplifting and powerful, this prelude serves as the cycle's brilliant finale. Barvinsky's piano preludes incorporate symbols and imitations of Ukrainian folklore. Lilia Nazar stated that Barvinsky, quote, represented Ukrainian mentality and nature through his music, end of quote. Having been immersed in Ukrainian culture since birth, I absolutely agree with this statement. Through his 5 piano preludes, Barvinsky not only incorporated Ukrainian folk sound in piano music, but also brought it to life with the imitations of specific associated instrumental, rhythmical, and tonal features. The significance of Vasyl Barvinsky's work to Ukrainian cultural life and the musical socio-cultural development of the people is monumental. His work became instrumental in the process of widening musical education and still resonates to this day. Vasyl Barvinsky reached the heights of compositional mastery and influenced his contemporaries and further generations of talented musicians. Today, his compositional contributions are once again carefully studied and newly included in pedagogical and performance practices. I hope that one day his work will be widely available to Canadian performers and audiences. Barvinsky lives on through his music and inspires musicologists and performers like myself to discover new dimensions of musical style somewhere between Impressionism, New Romanticism, and folk traditions. Thank you.